Well, you know I come from a long line of cocks just like me, who never stop believing despite our history. Cause though there's been heartbreak and oh so many tears, I know one day I won't have to say wait until next year. Cause I watched every quarter of 2010, from the beat down of Bama to Atlanta's bitter end. And I've cheered for Alshon Jeffrey, Melvin Ingram and Connor Shaw, and Jadeveon and Marcus were the best I ever saw. Yeah, and I hate them Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators, and Rocky Top. Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old cock. Yes, and when I die, I have just one request. So if you could, would you promise me this? These boys can still kick the SEC's ass right now. I play quarterback probably, right? I just hand you the ball. I just hand you the ball every time. I've got 1 year of eligibility left, guys, in case you need me. All right, boys and girls, this is the emotional part of the song. If something happens to me between now and the last weekend in November, I want y'all to throw me in the cooler at Steel Hands and bring me out on that Saturday when we're going to kick Clemson's ass. And we're going to have one hell of a party. We're going to have, Ryan's going to be there, Corey's going to be there, Eric. Oh, that's Brian. Oh, he was good. Yeah. Hey, Brian Maddox right there. All right, so listen, boys and girls. We're going to have a hell of a tailgate party if that's where, and even if I don't die, we're still going to do it, okay? And the Midnight Choir is going to be there. And this is how it's going to go down. Coach Beamer's going to show up too. Here it goes, boys and girls. Put a keg on my coffin inside the state fairgrounds. Serve chicken and biscuits with all the fixings, gather everyone around. Have Coach Beamer say some words, let Hootie lead the choir. And then send the boys off to destroy them damned old Clemson Tigers. Cause I heard all the stories of the great George Rogers. Now back in 1980, it made the whole nation holler. And I've seen that photograph of young Steve Tannehill up at Old Death Valley, signing his name on the field. Yeah, and I love to hear 2001 if Bill Williams Price rock. Oh, what else can I say? Until my dying day, I'll be a South Carolina Gamecock. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Hold on. Yes, I will. Football!
And what's up, Gamecock Nation? Welcome in. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, live from Market on Main. We are, of course, presented every single day by our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. Appreciate Clint helping make this show possible. Again, we're at Market on Main. Come on out. Chris and I are in a bubble right now, quite literally. It's a beautiful outdoor facility here. You can watch the game on this big screen that's right to our right, and you can actually stay warm as well. So pretty cool little deal. This is our South Carolina preview show, final preview before the game. What's up to everybody already in the chat? And we will we'll tell you a little bit more about Market on Main and about Clint Hammond here in a second. I believe you think Strelow's good to go. Yep, I see him down there. Let's go ahead and bring him in. We're going to be joined now by our good buddy. It is Paul Strelow, TigerIllustrated.com. Joining us now to talk a bit about the Clemson Tigers and give us some insight there. Paul, how we doing today, man?
Doing fantastic. Hope you gentlemen are as well.
Yes, sir. We are good, and we appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about this Clemson football team. I know, obviously, very busy week for everybody covering these two teams. If you've been as busy as us, which I'm sure you have been, I know you. There's been a lot going on, man. So I really appreciate you taking the time. We always ask, our first question is very general. If you're a Gamecock fan who has not watched Clemson this year, what do Carolina fans need to know about this Clemson team, Paul?
This is a very different Clemson team, and I suspect most South Carolina fans know that. Offensively, much different. It's a grinding offense. They have struggled really, in passing the ball, and a lot has trickled down from there. Defensively, they do a lot of the same things. Personnel will be familiar, and their approach in probably coming at South Carolina will be different. But their mode of operation is much different. They are much more into offensively, a slower playing possession game. I think you'll see Clemson, as they have the last two games, really rely tomorrow trying to establish a running game and seeing if from there, they can, kind of mitigate the circumstances they have offensively, where you've got two freshmen at receiver, who really have only played a lot of ball the last two games. Started the season as probably their number 7 and 8 on the depth chart. So you'll see some two tight end formation and really try and rely on, the running game to take a lot off the plate of DJ Uiagalelei and some younger guys. They're a lot like South Carolina offensively this year in the best personnel is at running back. How do you feature and craft an offense around that?
Paul, thanks again for joining us, man. Chris here. Appreciate your time. So that's where I wanted to go next. You mentioned that Clemson's top two wideouts are probably, or they are way down the depth chart at the beginning of the year. Carolina fans are used to, in the past 4 years or so, they're used to being so beat up by the time the Clemson game rolls around that the team has a completely different look, especially on defense. This year, it's Carolina that's remained relatively healthy, and Clemson has had a pile up of injuries. So I know you don't have time. It would take up your entire allotment if we had to go through all of them. But tell us about the most impactful injuries and where this team is from a health standpoint going into this game.
Clemson's going to be down 20-some scholarship players when all is said and done. Injuries aren't the reason they've necessarily struggled this year, but it's prevented them from really building any continuity and kind of improving like they could have mid-year. There's been constant turnover, especially when you look at receiver and who Uiagalelei has to throw to, but even on a week-to-week basis, kind of piecemealing and patching the interior of the offensive line. They've had different running backs to juggle each game. So in that regard, I think the Clemson you'll see will be more familiar to what they have been the last 1 or 2 games. But, I think what it has done is allowed the two freshman receivers, Dakari and Bo Collins, to develop a good bit over the last 2 games. And it's changed the complexion a little bit for the run game, frankly. They've struggled early in the year for a lot of different reasons, but the perimeter blocking from some of their bigger name receivers was pretty poor, whether it be effort or execution. And I think less has been more these last 2 games, and being able to stick 2 freshmen out there who kind of give the energy and effort there to help in that kind of game. I think that one key as far as injury goes will be how healthy Will Shipley is. He's been nursing what looks like a bum ankle here, particularly last week in the Wake Forest game, even though he had over 100, still kind of gimpy here and there. And so they've got 2 to 3 really good backs when you look at Shipley, Kobe Pace, Phil Maffa, but Shipley is the best of the 3. And how healthy he is and how much, what kind of necessarily, I guess, how much juice he's got there to kind of go for a home run shot. He's been able to hit more singles and doubles on his ankle. Hasn't really had the burst that he displayed in the first quarter of the season. So I think how healthy Shipley is will be significant, as well as Uiagalelei. while he's had various accuracy issues throughout the course of the year that relate to fundamentals, footwork, etc., he's wearing a heavy knee brace on his right knee and has really struggled, over these last couple games since wearing that brace to plant and really get a lot on certain throws. And so they've been able to work around that or just, be better than that in other facets. But I think that could be a factor to watch Saturday night on whether that impacts his accuracy on the road compared to when he's in the comforts of Death Valley and has had a lot of people, supporting him and pulling for him there.
Paul, you talked about sort of the differences in this Clemson offense the last few games. I guess, if you will, could you give us a little bit of a scouting report on the three backs you were just talking about as far as similarities and differences in style? And, Chris and I have sort of just been in agreement. It's like every single game around here, it's the same conversation. If South Carolina can run the football a little bit, if they can slow down their opponent's running game, that they have a shot. If they don't do those things, then generally they don't have a shot at all. So, like you said, both offensives have sort of grinded it out, and that's been the recipe. So maybe if you can give us a little bit of an idea at the different skill sets at that position, and maybe just the kind of the blueprint for Clemson on offense and what their running game looks like.
Yes, Kobe Pace, who's relatively the veteran, is a second-year guy there. I think he's more of a doubles inside the tackles kind of runner who can, who might not necessarily be a home run guy or bounce outside. Good vision, can get small, get into spaces. I think he gives Clemson a little different dynamic. Mafa is the biggest of the three at 225. But I think as far, he's trying to get healthy, as well as I think they trust the others more in pass protection and kind of knowing where to be and being able to execute everything. Shipley gives you a bit of everything. He can get outside. He can, for a guy who looks smaller, he's bigger than you anticipate at 205. He can go inside, outside. He can add a variable as a pass catcher that the other backs necessarily don't quite have that weaponry. And so I think that Shipley gives you the most. It's a matter of whether he's healthy, and he's really kind of emerged as the leader of the offense, as far as kind of the vocal guy, which for a freshman is an interesting dynamic, particularly with all the stars that Clemson has recruited in. For him, it's strictly a matter of health and what do they get out of the offensive line, which you guys can attest to as well, and how that matches up with the various styles.
Paul, so I think from the Carolina standpoint, not covering the program but watching it from afar, I think every week, paying attention to Clemson this year, I would always kind of wait for their offense to finally break out. And okay, this offense is too talented, injuries notwithstanding, to perform this way, scoring 17 points, 20 points, eking out fourth quarter games and such. It never really happened until last week, for the most part, against, Power 5 competition. Finally happened last week against Wake Forest, where they break out with what you would kind of expect on a yearly basis from this Clemson team. Do you think that was Clemson finally, to some degree, finding a formula and hitting its stride? Was it more about a Wake Forest defense that's been pretty porous this year, or was it a little bit of both?
I think it was a lot of both, and I don't know that based on the body of work that you can necessarily characterize it as Clemson making this huge stride and you're going to see a 45-point-a-game kind of offense like we're accustomed to seeing. I think that, even going into the third quarter there last week against Wake Forest, it was a tight game, almost a one-possession game that could have gone either way based on a fumble here or there. And Clemson just gradually wore Wake Forest down, both, from the way they were able to stymie their offense and then just kind of grind out, yards and carries with the offensive line, with the backs, and gradually, here and there incorporating Uiagalelei in the run game, even though he couldn't move. So I think it was more Wake Forest was susceptible to the manner in which Clemson attacked them, and I don't know that I think South Carolina has a better defensive line than what Wake Forest presents, and especially it being on the road. I don't think Clemson can necessarily go in and expect the same returns there. That said, I do think it was a building block for Clemson, both in, as a confidence standpoint, and I think they kind of have an idea now, who they want on the offensive line and what positions. It might not necessarily be the ideal in size and talent, but I think they've shored some things up by sticking with some veterans there. A Mason Trotter, a Hunter Rayburn on the inside. So I think they have a better idea, closer to establishing identity. And I think that's been an issue for Clemson all year is what do you hang your hat on? Because it hasn't just been Uiagalelei. It's been receivers who've had some drops in and out with injuries, having to constantly shuffle the interior of the offensive line, both for injuries and production. And so they haven't really been able to turn to one position, one facet, that they can really lean on. Like last year when they stuck Uiagalelei in, well, things went a lot better because they had a veteran offensive line, two senior receivers who were very productive. Travis Etienne. There were a lot better and more stable parts around him. They've just had instability at just about every position. And so if there's a takeaway for Clemson last week to feel good about, it's that they've become more stable across the board on offense, and I think they're taking progressive developmental steps as a result.
Paul, I want to shift away from the actual game real quick, then we'll come back to it. But I know a lot of Gamecock fans on here would be curious to hear what you're hearing on Antonio Williams. Right now, Antonio Williams not on the expected list of visitors for the game at South Carolina this week, but actually one of the rare times that these two programs are going head-to-head on a recruit. Clemson is obviously off last Saturday. What are you hearing on Antonio Williams, and how do you maybe see this thing playing out in what should be, I would say, a pretty intriguing little recruiting battle for fans to keep an eye on these next few weeks?
It is, and the timing is fascinating. Antonio has clearly not been in any rush to make a decision. And some people speculated or theorized maybe that was waiting on Clemson, but I don't think that's been the case. I think they are content to see how things play out, from coaching carousels to what they see through the season to just kind of letting the market for him to settle. And I think if you followed how, the steps that led to his visit last weekend unofficially, that was kept very under the radar, very quiet. I don't think they wanted a lot of splash there, both from a lot of Clemson headlines and the pressure that brings, as well as, fallout from opposing fan bases that would be shouting at them, for why they shouldn't consider Clemson. And so I think that's a piece to the puzzle this week on why, Williams might still stick with that Auburn official visit I think they might just want to stay away from the whole circus that it could cause, or at least announcing coming to the South Carolina game would cause in advance. So kind of the way they've approached it is fascinating there. I don't know that Auburn for me is really going to be a contender in the end based on kind of everything I've heard. I think it's I think the three are Clemson, South Carolina, Ole Miss. And my personal belief is I think it's Clemson, South Carolina, because I think family is so important there, and wanting to, while, there are family roots there at Ole Miss, family still living in Oxford. I think the chance to have parents, siblings, all relatively close, come see you on most Saturdays will be significant. So when you pair Clemson against South Carolina, I think South Carolina is probably gaining a little momentum there. I think Clemson had work to do, even when they did offer, just kind of getting past being late to the party, as well as, that kind of being framed to them for a while, how much of a priority they are to others. I don't know that that's necessarily a hurdle that the Clemson cannot get past, but I don't think they're past it yet. And so I think how much time and opportunity they're given to is a key variable there. I think South Carolina showing the progress they have last week, the last couple weeks, I think it's probably improved their. But how is Antonio Williams and his family ready to make a decision soon, or will they stretch this out, give Clemson an official visit if they can in mid-December before that early signing period? I think that odds are, or what the kind of interesting part is, do they carry it to the early signing period and kind of have a a surprise announcement. So for me, it's a Clemson South Carolina battle is where I think the odds are, and I think both. I think South Carolina's got a lot invested in that kid, but I also think that they've held off, not committing on quite yet for a reason. So I think there are pros and cons when you look at each camp, and it's going to be interesting to see what weight is given, and does Saturday night impact that? Does South Carolina show with its performance that, hey, we've closed ground and given him more reason to pick South Carolina? Does Clemson win? And let's win decidedly, maybe even, and then get kind of in his mind reinforce, hey, there's a difference between the two programs. So I don't place a single game outcome saying it makes the decision here, but I think it could reasonably have influence.
Paul, with so much talk about Clemson's offense and how it hasn't kind of met their standard, and so much talk about Carolina's offense too, I think that's been lost a little bit in this. And every game, when Wes and I are breaking down Carolina, it's always, well, the defense can do this. If they play well, it's going to keep Carolina in the game. But regardless of how well their defense plays on a given Saturday, can they score enough to win? And I think that is another key. I mean, Carolina's defense could play very well against Clemson, and still they're going to have to get marched down and score. So this Clemson defense has, it seems like, kept that standard at least to a degree. They've been there. So give us kind of a short version of maybe what to expect with this Clemson defense. You mentioned earlier that they're still doing a lot of the same things, but tell us about their productivity and maybe any of the matchup advantages or disadvantages they may bring here.
I agree that it is very much a which offense can score against these defenses. Not that South Carolina has a great defense, but I think they have shored things up and stabilized a lot under this new coaching staff. And conversely, but I think Clemson is more prone than South Carolina's offense over the course of the year to kind of shoot itself in the foot and just give up points and do something that ends up being ridiculous and kind of hurting the defense and hurting the overall. So that makes the interesting dynamic. With Clemson defense against South Carolina offense, I think what you'll probably see is Brent Venables incorporate a bunch of, he has a kitchen sink full of pressures from all different angles, a lot of different linebacker blitzes. Really try and use that variety and that aggression to come at Jason Brown, force him to make a quick decision and be accurate after that decision. And I think that's where, Brown over a couple games, I think he's improved greatly there. But I think that's probably where they try and test, is testing the South Carolina offensive line, which has given up pressure through the course of a lot of games, and making Jason Brown make quick decisions and go from there. How does Clemson, I think Clemson, where they've shown to be vulnerable at times, and I think where it fits to South Carolina is I think South Carolina loves getting a running back out of the backfield. If you can get Zaquandre White out wide on the perimeter, Clemson doesn't exactly have great speed at inside linebacker by any stretch. So I think that, can South Carolina manipulate that and use those guys as pressure release? And Clemson isn't one to necessarily move around defensive backs. They kind of do what they do structurally. And so South Carolina and what matchup they want to try and get Josh Vann in, probably against the safeties against Clemson. I think you saw last week against Wake that Wake picked on Andrew Makuba a little bit, the freshman. Or do you, as much as Clemson likes to go nickel, do you try and go at Tyler Venables? So kind of how, the X's and O's there to me are interesting and how they combat that. But like you said, I think in the end, where Clemson's defense has retained its identity, I think they've bent a little bit more, particularly the first half of the year. You're more likely to get drives, but they still aren't allowing touchdowns. And whether South Carolina can convert and change a couple field goals into touchdowns would make a big difference to me in this game, one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's a great point on those margins. Wes and I have particularly me, absolutely worn out the phrase, low margin of error for this football team at Carolina. And to that end, special teams have been pretty important. So last one I've got for you, Paul, is, I know from watching the games, BT Potter, one of the best kickers in the country, obviously at Clemson. So that's not a concern for the Tigers. But Tell us a little bit more about this Tigers special teams and, what kind of the book on those guys are coming into this game.
Oh, I think BT Potter, while he has a strong leg, he's a big weapon in the kickoff game. But I think over the course of the year, kickoff specialists tend to lose a little bit of that leg, and so we're seeing, more returns here and there. And I think Clemson can be a little susceptible in kickoff coverage, as UConn demonstrated against them returning the opening kick. Punter, they've got a veteran in there, Will Spires, who's not going to spaz. He's improved over the latter couple of years of his lengthy career. And so while he might not be a weapon, I think they're solid back there. Usually you don't have to worry about a big mistake. So I think they tend to be good there. And otherwise, they've just tried to play it safe and secure. They've lost a number of their punt returners and by extension, some of the kickoff return guys to where punt return, they're using, either Will Brown, usually Will Brown, the walk-on receiver from Boiling Springs, or Will Sweeney, Dabo's son. Kickoff return, they aren't particularly splashy if Will Shipley is not back there, although provides a threat. So I think for Clemson, they just want special teams to not make mistakes and hit the layup, so to speak. Potter can hit a long field goal. He does provide some weaponry there. But it's still a kicker. He still, will miss his share. But, I think they've got a pretty good kicker, and otherwise you're just trying to play field position and not make mistakes, especially in what I think will be a pretty charged environment Saturday night.
Paul, great stuff as always, man. We appreciate the insight. Anybody watching or listening who wants to read the Clemson perspective, going over TigerIllustrated.com. That's Clemson.rivals.com. Again, Paul, man, we appreciate it. Enjoy the game on Saturday. And as always, man, great job giving us some insight, okay?
Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Great job on your end.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Have a good one, man. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. That's, again, Paul Strelow providing us some insight. Appreciate him taking the time. We normally have our guest on Thursday leading into the game. Obviously, no show yesterday, so Paul made it work last minute. We certainly appreciate that. Again, we didn't give him the full spiel on Market on Main, Chris, so yeah. I want to go ahead and let them know, come on out. If you can't, the game is sold out, so if you can't make it to the game on Saturday, this is as good a spot as any in Columbia to watch the game. Directly to Chris's right, you have what is that thing, 24 feet, 23 feet LED screen. Do you think I'd remember by now? It's the biggest screen in Columbia. 1320 Main Street, Columbia, South Carolina, Market on Main. It is an outdoor-indoor venue. Sitting outside is, in my opinion, the best way to enjoy Market on Main. Sometimes it gets a little chilly, and that's why they have this igloo. Is that what they call them? I believe It looks like an igloo to me that we're sitting in here at Market on Main. So if you want to come out and enjoy the game, great place to do it, and we certainly appreciate Market on Main for hosting us every single Friday this football season out here. Come on out. They've got a pep rally going on tonight if you're watching us live on Friday night. Great time, great spot. So, again, appreciate Paul Strelow providing some insight, Chris. And I'm curious. We always learn some things when guests come on. And I'll be honest, man, I normally try to dive in as well as I possibly can on opponents. I went into that interview not as prepared as I usually am. I will blame the holiday, but I learned more this week that I didn't already know, and maybe this was common knowledge. If it is, I readily admit I didn't know, but I didn't realize maybe how banged up Clemson is. I knew about the injuries that were already apparent as far as guys being out. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that Shipley is still dealing with an injury. I didn't realize that their quarterback is dealing with an injury. That to me sort of starts to shrink. Like if I'm projecting how many points Clemson's probably going to score, I actually feel a good bit better from a South Carolina perspective about this defense's ability to hold Clemson down, because we saw what Tank Bigsby did last week.
Yeah.
Maybe if Shipley is healthy, it's one thing. Maybe if the quarterback run game is involved, it's another thing. But if those two things are sort of not, I don't know if there's anybody on that team right now that is up to the Tank Bigsby standard that South Carolina faced last week. Does that lower your expectations for Clemson's offense a little bit, hearing that from Paul?
Yeah, I think so. You got Shipley dealing with an ankle. Uyunglele, which at the beginning of the year, you remember what Clemson fans were constantly saying, why isn't this guy involved more in the run game? He's 6'5", 250, something like that, and he can run. He's a powerful runner. Well, now he's banged up, big bulky knee brace. As Paul said, they did involve him against Wake Forest, but a little bit more in a keep him honest type of role. He's not going to have that as much explosiveness. So obviously that affects you, and South Carolina's maybe ability to affect him, whether stopping him in the run game or even in pass rush. Maybe that comes into play too. They're already down a bunch of backs. This team came in with a wealth of backs in the season. They've had a few transfer. They've had injuries. Will Shipley, Kobe Pace is still healthy. He even mentioned Phil Maffa, who really made a run as a in the early part of the year. He's even banged up. So yeah, I do agree. Now the one thing is those three guys are still really good. When healthy, even when not healthy, they're pretty good. DJ can still run it, and you need to keep, you do have to be honest against him. And then the receivers that they found, Bo Collins, Dakari Collins, two big guys. Even though they're freshmen, perimeter blocking isn't something you go into every game saying this is a key. But we've seen it on the Carolina side too. When they block well on the perimeter, this run game has taken off. Same thing with Clemson. They're getting better effort from their younger guys, and that's helped their run game.
Well, and they may be on their 8th-string receivers. You go look at Chris's star power for this week. They're still absolute studs as far as what they were out of high school. Man, right. I remember following both those guys, recruitment, and watching their film and being like, okay, that's a future star right there. Like it's not like you're getting down to guys that don't have great baseline talent. Now, maybe they weren't ready at the beginning of the year. Maybe they've had to sort of wait their turn. Maybe they've had trial by fire, you would say. But let's not get it twisted and be like, oh, these guys can't run. If you're getting recruited by Clemson to play wide receiver, you can play the position. Like you're pretty solid. So it's still going to be a test for South Carolina's defense. But I think, and I was on 107.5 before we came in, and I hadn't really thought about this, but it just kind of hit my brain as they were asking the question. I think when Carolina faces a quarterback that is not, and I like to use the word efficient, much like TJ Finley last week. TJ Finley made some NFL throws last week. In particular, by the way, I did see that spin out you were talking about.
That was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was towards the end of the game.
Yeah, it was.
I saw the spin out. That was beautiful. That play early on where he rolled to his right and threw that corner route back to the sideline on an absolute rope. Not every, even high, like FBS Power 5, not every quarterback can make that throw on that line like that. Just like with Clemson, you have a guy who is big-bodied, tough to bring down, strong arm. There will be some throws. I like the way Clayton White said it. You have to cover them longer and further down the field. That's something we talked about with TJ Finley as well, because the guys can get 60 yards downfield, and there's a quarterback there that can still make that throw. So there will be some throws tomorrow night where people are going to be like, that was an NFL throw. But if a quarterback is not efficient, I think this defense against most teams at home has shown they're going to give up some yards in the running game. But they can that recipe, that blueprint, a little bit of a bend but don't break, a little bit of, they have to find their turnovers, but they've been very good at taking advantage of turnover opportunities. I'll even go back like the Kentucky game. Kentucky ran the football well against South Carolina, but they were held to a reasonable number as far as points allowed. Sure. Auburn ran the football, but they were held to an overall point total that South Carolina was able to outscore them. To me, Carolina just has to give itself enough opportunities to get off the field. They're not going to always be in third and long. They just have to get in enough third and longs to where they put these quarterbacks in a position that they have to make big throws under duress. And I don't know. To me, I don't see this Clemson offense, even if they do run the football well, I don't see them just going up and down the field on South Carolina. I think Carolina's defense will hold Clemson in the 20s. Now, if that number is 21, Carolina has a shot to win this game. If that number starts creeping up to 28, I don't know if I can sit here realistically and tell the Carolina fan base that I think South Carolina is going to go score 31 points and win 31-28. So to me, that's kind of the key. Like, is it super low in the 20s or is it high in the 20s? The more we hear, though, the more I think this defense can hold them somewhere in that window.
Even then, I agree. They're going to have to do that to win. Even then, it's not a slam dunk because that's what you're talking about with Paul. You got to go score that margin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk.
You're right. But, yeah, I know you're not. Here's the point.
Chris has notes today, by the way.
I have notes. I have some stats I'm making up. Or I'm not making up the stats. Carolina has not get in their wins. They have 6 wins. Their highest surrendered point total was 20. It's their highest surrendered point total. First game against EIU, 0. Then their other wins, 17, 14, 20, 17, 17. You have up 17 against Auburn and Florida in their home wins. So it would be an outlier for Clemson to score 24 and Carolina win. Tied to that, Carolina, playing against Clemson's defense, Clemson has the best defense, in my opinion, of any of these teams too, right? So that's why they've got to keep this point total low. And however you get it, have to make Clemson kick field goals, turnovers, however you can do it. I mean, we saw a game at home this year where Kentucky turned it over a bunch, and that was the reason that scoreline wasn't higher. Sure. But Kentucky scored 16 points. If you say opposing team A comes in at home, they score 16, did you win or lose? You're going to say they won. I mean, that is going to be your gun-to-head pick. But the difference was Carolina couldn't take advantage. So that's, again, a huge storyline. Now, they're going to have to slow Clemson down defensively, and I think the more we talk through it, the more I agree they've got that chance. But is it going to be enough?
Is South Carolina in a little bit better situation offensively now to get there than they were against Kentucky earlier in the year? I think they – you say what you want about this offense, say what you want about the scheme, say what you want about the play calling. I think they found their best recipe. Yeah. Now it's not pretty. No. And they're not going to score 35 unless and you say that the only way they score 35 is if it's a game like Florida where anything we say, there's always outliers. Yeah. And that's the beauty of football. Sometimes a game will get away from a team. You just have a bad night, put the ball on the ground. Nobody was predicting Florida to give up what they did in the first half and then have basically a walk-off defensive touchdown for a defensive tackle against them to end the first half. When that happens, the game can get away from you. I'm more thinking about it like 9 times out of the 10 that you play. If there's one outlier where things just the simulation gets all messed up, like things just go wild. What happens 9 times out of 10 these teams play? The more I think about it, the line's at 11.5 right now with Clemson being banged up. I still think that's high, man. I think Clemson is the favorite in this game. Realistically, honestly, if they play 10 times, Clemson would win more than South Carolina. But I think that margin is actually a good bit tighter than 11.5, and I think that margin, it's 81% FPI, Clemson. So for our little how many times out of 10, they're saying 8 times out of 10, Clemson beats South Carolina. I think it's more 6 or 7 now. Whereas you go into this game, what was it 2 years ago? It's probably Clemson wins 9.5. You got to
10
add
out of 10.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you go in with, you don't ever want to say no chance, but the path. It's like in Endgame when the guy's like, look, there, I did 1 million simulations, and in one of them, South Carolina wins the game. Right. That's the way it felt 2 years ago.
It did.
And I think you look now, it's a lot tighter. And Beamer keeps, he was at Tiger Burn on Monday. He keeps bringing up the fact that South Carolina will have an environment on Saturday night that Clemson hasn't been in one of these environments in 2 years, basically. I think this will be the best. This will be one of the best South Carolina environments that we've seen in this place in a long time, because the fan base is fired up. They think South Carolina has a shot. I can tell y'all just from the tickets and the availability of tickets, this ain't just a sellout. Like, it's a sellout. And there's a difference. Sometimes you get a sellout and there's still ways to get tickets. This thing is legitimately going to be packed. And I do want to talk recruiting for a minute, Chris, because Gamecock Center subscribers can go on there, check out our list of expected visitors that's posted on GamecockCentral.com. I said the Kentucky list was one of the best I had seen. I think the combination of both seniors that are uncommitted, getting your committed guys on campus, but plus the young guys that are going to be in town 2023, 2024, this is a huge opportunity for Shane Beamer and staff to set the table with some young guys while maybe making a final push with some older guys.
Yeah, I mean, just going through the list that you updated a little while ago, man, some additions that you go, whoop, okay, that's a good last-minute addition. So, a combination of committed guys who can be ambassadors for you, and some uncommitted guys in the senior realm that are still huge priorities. And like you said, the youngsters. And this is a key time for the youngsters, This is kind of shaping the programs in their mind that, hey, I'm going to continue looking at this program. I like what I see. I don't like what I see. Many of these 23 and 24 guys that they've had on campus, this is not their first time here at South Carolina. They've been here multiple times. And like you said, it's going to be a great environment. So an outstanding opportunity, to showcase to them.
Let's mention a couple of them.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the one I think that has our message board buzzing, and I'll be honest with y'all, still a long shot. But how many times in that little chat window over there, Chris, have people said, "What's up with Jalen Sneed?"
Yeah, a bunch.
Yeah, Notre Dame commit, Jalen Sneed, and let's we'll say it like it is. You always have to make sure these guys actually come in, that they make it in. But on the expected visit list, Jalen Sneed this week, the Notre Dame commitment. On the expected visitors list, Ramon Brown, Razor Ramon, best nickname in this class, 4-star running back from Manchester High School up in Virginia. Let's be honest, we all have our personal favorites as far as prospects and their skills and their game. Razor Ramon Brown, one of my personal favorite films of this class. Dude's a stud. Stone Blanton coming in.
That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Because I think you and I, Chris, both sort of felt like just based on actions that Carolina had been strongly in it with Stone Blanton. And it just, this may just be our perception. It felt like Carolina had faded with Stone Blanton. The season wasn't going too well, as of like 3.5 weeks ago. Blanton still committed for baseball to Mississippi State. It just felt like Carolina had given it a shot, but Stone probably was interested in other places. He was expected at the Egg Bowl last night. I don't know if he made it or not. I'm assuming that he did, but is now on the list. He's on the expected list that was, that we were told. Stone confirmed he's going to be here. So that's now multiple visits to Columbia for Stone Blanton. Some, he went on the official, but then this is on his own dime. Yeah. There's some real interest from Stone Blanton. So I'm kind of recircling him as one to keep an eye on down the stretch of recruiting.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. And it's been really a compelling recruitment because this summer, South Carolina, based on what we heard on the visit, was in a pretty good spot in terms of the momentum they had built. But then in the back of your mind, you knew, okay, he's still committed to Mississippi State for baseball. He's still a Mississippi kid. You knew Ole Miss would be involved. He's still got those options out there, yet he's remained uncommitted. What's the reason for that? It's kind of like we talked about with Antonio Williams. That means that the door is still open for Carolina. So this will be a very, very interesting visit for us to track and to see what the feedback is from Blanton coming out of it. And we're going to be busy after this weekend, Wes, with recruiting reactions for sure.
Yeah, Sunday will be a busy day. We'll see if we're talking about a great atmosphere but a South Carolina loss, or we're talking about a great atmosphere and a marquee signature South Carolina win. By the way, shout out to our buddy Mike Yuva tuning in. I got my my Mix in a Water shirt today. I will say this. Do not mix in the water on Saturday. I don't think there's going to be a lot of mixing in of waters. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. I'm excited for that. By the way, Mike will be at Patrick Davis's concert. If you're a Patrick Davis fan, he's at the Senate tonight. Toys for Tots show is the 5th annual Toys for Tots show. So if you're in the area, still tickets available. Supposed to bring a children's gift and put it under the tree, and then that will be donated from Patrick. Really, always a great show, but really an awesome situation, awesome idea. So go check that out. If you go to patrickdavismusic.com, you can get tickets. So shout out to Patrick. Big Gamecock fan, big Gamecock Central supporter. So we always try to support Patrick as much as we can as well. Jalen Sneed, I still think Carolina's a bit of a long shot.
Yeah.
Probably ends up at Notre Dame. Let's go ahead and set that expectation before everybody flips out. Probably going to Notre Dame. But there's always a but. If he shows up at South Carolina tomorrow night and the defense continues to play well, the atmosphere is incredible, you never know. If you get a kid on your campus, you never know. You always have a shot. So that'll be something we'll certainly be tracking on Saturday. Let's get back to the game, man. Some final thoughts here and kind of how we see this thing playing out. Was there anything else that Strelow said that maybe is worth us diving into? I will say this, Chris. I'll throw it out to you, and then you tell me what you think. The fact that Carolina has done a really good job of getting Zaquandre White at times in space in the passing game, combined with what Strelow told us about Clemson's inside linebackers maybe not being the fastest and being susceptible to running backs out of the backfield, that's got to be a matchup that Satterfield and company will be hoping to exploit tomorrow.
It is. And when he said that, my mind immediately went to Zaquandre White, a couple of the big plays that he's had out of the backfield in the last couple of weeks. Also got my mind on Juju McDowell because he's a mismatch against linebackers who can't run. And so now within that, there's an interesting chess match. You go into it saying South Carolina's probably going to have to give their O-line help at times, whether it's backs or tight ends. So there's going to be this schematic thing going on where if you're Marcus Satterfield, you're sitting there going, all right, when am I keeping my backs in? When am I letting them out? Jason Brown is going to be a huge part of his decision-making, finding the backs in one-on-one opportunities. But that was a very interesting storyline. And speaking of Juju McDowell, Wes, if he can get a shorter kickoff from BT Potter, he also mentioned they're potentially susceptible, or they are susceptible. We saw UConn take about the opening kick. Juju has been about 5 times this close to taking one back. That would set off Williams-Brice if we saw that, no doubt about it. But also, to me, something to watch.
But before Juju McDowell's career is over, he's going to house one, right?
You would think so.
I feel like that's going to happen.
That would be a miscarriage of justice if not.
Yeah, he's going to take one at some point. He has been, like you said, really, really close, man. How many times have you been viewing a kickoff and you just have that little like, oh, this might be a return, and then that one guy trips him up, or the one guy doesn't get blocked, and Juju does a good job of just getting north and south. That's the key to kickoff returns. I think let's keep it right there on special teams. Whenever we have somebody on that says, Clemson's special teams are just really trying not to screw it up, that always sets off a bell in my head, because Carolina's goal on special teams is not to just not try to screw it up. Their goal on special teams is to make a play, is to change a game. That's been the Beamer ball philosophy since the early Frank Beamer days at Virginia Tech. So you can't always manufacture that. Sometimes you need to find a weakness in your opponent. That's the key of special teams, is finding that weakness and finding something you can exploit. And then when you see the opportunity, having a play in place and then being able to execute it. It's very difficult to predict, in my opinion, that you're going to return a kickoff or a touchdown or block a punt or have a big play in special teams. But when you do manage to manufacture that, it can change a game. If we're talking about Carolina to get to that 21 mark, to get to that 24 mark, to get to that 28 mark, it probably needs to include either another defensive score, a special team score, or even just one of those plays that puts the off. You have to steal the possession along the way. Even if you don't get a defensive touchdown or a special team score, do you set up your offense, at the 15-yard line for an easy score? To me, that's got to be one of the keys to this game, because if we're right that, Vegas has it 11.5, if we're right, or if I'm right, that I think it's more like a little lower than that, like a touchdown difference between the two teams, that's the type thing that could flip a game either to even or into Carolina's favor.
Yeah, and with the game that's expected to be so evenly matched, even by Vegas standards, 11 points, not a huge margin, right? And so I'm with you. I think it's lower. I think it's about a touchdown in one team's favor. So that is going to be critical. Things like turnovers, field position, being able to flip the field and give yourself a short field as opposed to having to really for either of these offenses. Neither of these offenses have gone up and down the field consistently with 75-yard drives or with 75-yard touchdown plays. We haven't seen that from either of these teams. And so that's going to be critical in this game. My, big key for me, Wes, kind of one closing thought I wanted to make sure I got in there. Shane Beamer talked about after the Auburn game, getting the game to the fourth quarter. I gave a stat for South Carolina's 6 wins, and their losses, there have been 2 that have been close, Missouri and Kentucky. The other 3 were not close in favor of the other team. And what we saw in those games, 2 of those 3, it was out of hand by the first quarter. What was it? I wrote it down. Tennessee, 28-0 after the first quarter, 38-7 at halftime, 14-0 in the first quarter for A&M, and 31-0 at halftime. The other game was Georgia. They ran away with it. That was only 14-6. Missouri and Kentucky were both close. They were both 7-0 games, one in favor of Carolina, one in favor of of Kentucky in those 2 games. So I think that is critical. If you can come out, and if it's basically tied, or Clemson's up 3, up 7 after the first quarter, you're going to go into it feeling fairly good about your chances to continue to stay competitive the rest of this game.
Well, I think it's a great point because, A, it keeps the crowd firmly in this game. B, it keeps your recipe or your blueprint intact, because I think that the recipe for this offense is to not be in situations where it feels like it has to go score. You always want to score. If you're a fan, if you're a coach, you always want your team to score. But when Carolina's put in situations where they have to go score, to me, that's where they have to obviously be a little more aggressive, and they get themselves in trouble. This offense is at its best when they can grind out drives, when they can grind out games, really, and kind of just muck it up, like ugly it up. If you have to play a field position, if this is a field position game where South Carolina is making a first down or 2, punting the ball, pinning Clemson back, then they make a first down or 2 and they pin South Carolina back, and it's just the clock's running, but there's not a whole lot of scoring going on. That's not pretty, but that works in South Carolina's favor all day long. That's what the Auburn second half was. It was both teams sort of just filling each other out, but not a lot happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's key for South Carolina. If you're down early, like you're talking about, then you're sort of forced to have to keep up, so to speak, on offense. You have to be a little bit more aggressive. You have to call the plays a little bit differently. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure on an offensive line that hasn't been great in pass protection against. These guys are going to come after you on defense.
Oh yeah,
and it puts a lot of pressure on Jason Brown. I said last week, I think we agreed, Jason Brown was like the most important person on the Carolina sideline. It didn't necessarily, honestly, play out like that. They sort of minimized what the quarterback position had to do last week. This week, though, I'm going to say Jason Brown is the most important guy on the field for Carolina, because he's going to have to walk that line we always talk about between taking what is there, but at times trying to take shots, trying to make a big play, and making the proper decisions when those opportunities present themselves. So I agree 100%, man. If it's 7-3 or 10-7 or 7-0 at the end of the first quarter, I don't care which team has the bigger number.
Yeah.
If that's the score, Carolina's sideline is going to be fine. The fan base is going to be fine, because they're so used. If you're a fan, you're so used to Clemson just blowing you out. Yeah. So that to me, keep this crowd in the game. Give yourself a chance. And if it gets to a fourth quarter game, maybe the momentum kind of shifts over to the South Carolina side. It'll be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm excited, man. Hope y'all are as well. Chris, real quick, you want to tell everybody about Dead Soxy, and we'll give our sponsors some love before we get out of here.
Yeah, Dead Soxy still has their buy one, get one free deal going on, DEADSOXY.com. Check those guys out at Dead Soxy, men's and women's socks, all different kinds, colors. Just go look at their catalog. You can see for yourself. Use the promo code BOGO, BOGO, at checkout. Make sure you have the items in your cart first and then apply it. Or you can use the promo code COCKY to get 25% off at Dead Soxy.
Yeah, appreciate Dead Soxy. Appreciate our friends at Primal Gourmet as well, primalgourmetsc.com. They deliver excellent chef-prepared meal prep plans. I've been hammering those personally. Been awesome. Of course, appreciate Clint Hammond, our presenting sponsor, clinthammond.com, 803-771-6933. And, of course, the fine folks here at Market on Main that have provided us with this awesome igloo that we're sitting in for today's podcast. And we appreciate all of you. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I don't know about you, man. I ate way too much food. I got to spend all next week recovering.
It was a smorgasbord. It was awesome, man.
It was great. Hope y'all had a great Thanksgiving. And, man, this season we get to talk about a bowl game too. So this is not our final preview of the season. I'm thankful for that we'll get to keep doing this and talking about games. But either way, we appreciate all the support and all the watchers and commenters and chatters throughout the entire regular season. It's been fun. I'll have my sort of final thoughts still with Kendall Smith. That'll be up tomorrow. Chris and I will be out and about at Williams-Brice Stadium. Go by the Gamecock Central tailgate as well. If you're a Gamecock Central subscriber, go check out the details for that on GamecockCentral.com, the Insider Forum. I'm just spewing off at the mouth, man. What else? Have we hit everything?
I think we've hit everything.
If I hit everything, we got to say
every single thing. Yeah, we've hit all of them.
We hit everything. Appreciate y'all. I'm gonna send y'all out the way we brought you in, and that is with the tunes of our buddy Patrick Davis. This is from the Gamecock Central kickoff party. Shout out to Patrick. Hope the concert goes well tonight. I'll be there. If you're there, come say what's up. We'll talk some ball. For Chris, I'm Wes. This has been GC Live at Market on Main. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy the game.
Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old car. We know I come from a long line of cocks just like me, who never stop believing despite our history. Cause though there's been heartbreak and oh so many tears, I know one day I won't have to say wait until next year. Cause I watched every quarter of 2010, from the beat down of Bama to Atlanta's bitter end. And I've cheered for Alshon Jeffrey, Melvin Ingram, and Connor Shaw, and Jadeveon and Marcus were the best I ever saw. Yeah, and I hate them Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators, and Rocky Top. Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old cock. Yes, and when I die, I have just one request. So if you could, would you promise me this? These boys can still kick the SEC's ass right now. I play quarterback probably, right? I just hand you the ball. I just hand you the ball every time. I've got 1 year of eligibility left, guys, in case you need me. All right, boys and girls, this is the emotional part of the song. If something happens to me between now and the last weekend in November, I want y'all to throw me in the cooler at Steel Hands and bring me out on that Saturday when we're going to kick Clemson's ass. And we're going to have one hell of a party. We're going to have Ryan's going to be there, Corey's going to be there, Eric. Oh, that's Brian. Oh, he was good. Yeah. Hey, Brian Maddox right there. All right, so listen, boys and girls. We're going to have a hell of a tailgate party if that's where, and even if I don't die, we're still going to do it, okay? And the Midnight Choir is going to be there. And this is how it's going to go down. Coach Beamer's going to show up too. Here it goes, boys and girls. Put a keg on my coffin inside the state fairgrounds. Serve chicken and biscuits with all the fixings, gather everyone around. Have Coach Beamer say some words, let Hootie lead the choir. And then send the boys off to destroy them damned old Clemson Tigers. Cause I heard all the stories of the great George Rogers. Now back in 1980, it made the whole nation holler. And I've seen that photograph of young Steve Tannehill up at Old Death Valley, signing his name on the field. Yeah, and I love to hear 2001 if Bill Williams prize to rock. Oh, what else can I say? Until my dying day, I'll be a South Carolina Gamecock. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Hold on. Yes, I will. All right, hold on. Over here. I grew up with this man playing guitar every morning. I like to call him, I call my dad the human alarm clock. Because every morning at 6:29, he'd crank his Marshall up to about 11. And he'd play some Led Zeppelin or some Jimi Hendrix or some Allman Brothers and shake our asses right out of bed. So if you will, put your hands together for the man, the myth, the legend, my old man, Mr. Rusty, the human alarm clock Davis. Give him some chicken picking, Daddy. So put a keg on my coffin inside the state fairgrounds. Serve chicken and biscuits with all the fixings, gather everyone around. Corey, come back. Have Coach Beamer say some words. Let Mark Bryan lead the choir. And then send the boys off to destroy them damned old Clemson Tigers. Cause I've heard all stories of the great George Rogers. Now back in 1980, it made the whole nation holler. And I've seen that photograph of young Steve Tannehill up at Old Death Valley, signing his name on the field. Yeah, and I love to hear 2001 and Bill Williams prize to rock. Oh, what else can I say? Until my dying day, I'll be a South Carolina Gamecock. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. A big old crowd. What do y'all say we do this again next year, boys and girls?